All right, we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Final segment this morning with Nick Leonardo talking legal issues. Of course, he is our legal expert. And, Bob's waiting through the break. You never know where Bob's going. We're going to take Bob's call. Bob, good morning. How are you, Bob?
Oh, no, okay. It's like, it's just two things,
Sure.
That cop that had to shoot that black woman, the veteran suiciding on the VA, and you need a phone app separate for mental cases.
What do you mean, like an app for mental cases?
Yeah.
To get help or to alert? That one case, there's the one that was on the CBS Evening News, and again this morning on a situation where another police officer is in trouble for shooting an African-American woman. And the details of that, there's video of it again. Video more and more in all these cases. It does in Hamburg is going to play a key role in all these cases. Another disturbing one on that front. As far as, I wanted to ask you about the death penalty. All right, I think a lot of people are saying, hey, no brainer on Michael Cummins if he's convicted, killed 8 people, death penalty. And I try to remind folks that it's real easy to say death penalty, but we're about to have an execution tomorrow here. Way's been cleared, the governor didn't intervene, a man's going to be executed tomorrow at Riverbend. He's been on death row since his conviction in the 1980s. This family, and how it goes in any other family going through this, has to go through appeals after appeals after appeals. I could make the argument for myself only. If a loved one of mine was to be killed by a crime, as horrible as that would be, I could almost see saying, if I had the choice, I would rather, Your Honor, that he or she serve life in prison without parole, and I never have to see or think about them again. Because conviction on a death penalty case takes forever. First of all, the trial, all the special people goes on, and then there's all these hearings that I have to maybe be a part of to observe and see what happens with these hearings. Can you see the argument for maybe just not a no-brainer to execute someone, because some of the victims' families may not want to go through all that? And I think we saw that, by the way, in the Holly Bobo case.
Well, I mean, you raise a good point. I mean, there's no doubt that the framers of the Constitution, people who wrote it, intended for there to be the death penalty. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. But at their time that they wrote the Constitution, there was never any thought about it taking 35 years and millions and millions and millions of dollars. So I think the fiscal note we see associated with the death penalty should be enough to make both sides of the aisle come together and say, gosh, this is a bureaucracy here. We're spending a lot of money. It's considerably cheaper to just put them in jail for the rest of their life. Yeah. And so, and as you say, with the victim's family, it continues to come. And what about the times where there are reprieves or they grant a stay of execution for a period of time, so the victim's family is up and down and up and down and up and down, and then you see all these people, advocating at the prison, that say that it's wrong, and so I just think it's better in more closure to not have that. And we see that in California, where the new governor out there, I mean, right or wrong, depends on where you fall, has commuted every one of those death sentences, to life in prison. So it's very, very expensive, and it takes an awfully long time. And I just don't think that that's what the framers of the Constitution intended when they're, and we see all these challenges to lethal injection and to electrocution. You're not entitled to a painless death. There's nowhere in the Constitution does it say you're entitled to a painless death. But and then you even see drug manufacturers that are not willing to make the drug cocktails. That they're pulling back, and so they're getting harder to get the materials to do it. So it's a problematic thing. And we saw back in the 70s there was a moratorium with the Supreme Court.
Right.
And there could potentially be a shift sometime in the future, if nothing more than just what it costs to do this.
Yeah, the expense involved with it. And you make a good point about the last second stays. The last mass murderer, going back to 1997, compared to the one in Sumner County we just had. TBI said it's been more than 20 years we've had something like this, and that was Paul Reed. Remember, Paul Reed killed a bunch of people in the Middle Tennessee area and up into Kentucky in one place, fast food restaurants, and shot and killed folks. Well, he was on death row for a long time, and I still remember he said, I want to stop my appeals, and they lined him up for execution. He had his last meal, and then he said, no, I want you to start my appeals up again that night. And they had to do it, and the poor family was there of the victims to watch him be executed. He was playing games. Paul Reed, by the way, ended up dying of natural causes behind bars.
Well, and one thing too that I think is an interesting point, we've touched on it a little earlier in this particular show, but to my recollection, there was never this big push to say that he was insane. To the contrary, the people that I know that knew him said that he was a charming guy, that he was in school, he was with the Ball State. I mean, so we don't see all this push for the insanity defense and the like. So maybe it's just a change in the way we view mental health, or a sign of the times.
Yeah, maybe so. It's just changed. With Paul Reed, you're right.
But the one similarity, though, is that you're going to have, you had Mr. Gonzalez sitting there on the stand. You showed that recently. He fingered him in the courtroom, and then we have this survivor, this grandmother.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is whether or not she can remember what happened.
This is in the Sumner County case, the one survivor in that house where there were 6 other people around her dead.
So if I'm the defense attorney, my thought is, well, if she turns on the TV in the hospital, if other people come to her, they're really refreshing her recollection, and so she might believe that she actually does remember, if and when she doesn't remember, if that makes sense. Because there's so much publicity and there's so much media, and we know if she's watching it, it might piece it together. So how do you cross-examine someone like that? I think it's a very delicate thing, because obviously, I bet you lunch that when this comes to trial, she's going to be up there saying.
You say so? Now, does she have to be willing to do it?
Well, they could subpoena her.
But gosh, I mean, if she just said it's too painful, I don't remember anything, and this is her own grandson she'll be testifying against, albeit with what he's accused of, I could see how she'd be willing to, but what if she just can't handle it?
Well, I mean, the state has lots of tools at their disposal to get witnesses into court, material witnesses like that. I mean, in extreme circumstances, the state, I've even seen them issue arrest warrants or bench warrants here for witnesses that won't come to court in a violent crime, and they'll say, look, you can either hang out with our investigator or you can go to jail for the next 2 days, but you're coming to court. So that's an extreme example. But
I think in this case, I don't know, she'd obviously be a big help, but I don't think they need her to convict this guy.
Well, and I don't know what other evidence that they necessarily have, and they may not. You're exactly right. There may not. I mean, there could be so much DNA evidence.
There's
there could
a lot
be
of blood evidence.
And so there may be unnecessary for her to even come to court. But if she does come to court, I mean, that's going to be the state's star witness, and that would be somebody I would probably lead off with.
Yeah.
I mean, after that, and maybe I would think it'd be a quick trial, but again, the prosecution goes through all their exhibits, whether there be 200 of them, and for my money, if this woman gets up there and says, I saw him do it and this is what he did, I don't know that I need to see bloody shoes and splatter and paraffin.
Yeah, that's all she wrote.
Right.
Let's go to JC. Hi, JC. Good morning. Hi, JC. Are you there?
Hello?
Hello. Go ahead, JC. What's on your mind?
Well, Nick, I can't understand. Our laws are based on the 10 Commandments, which was called the laws of Moses. Now, how are we still enforcing these laws based on what the Supreme Court said was a religious belief? So then we're forcing a religious belief off on others. So how are we still enforcing these laws?
Which laws are you talking about? With what kind of crime are you talking about?
Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. All of these were based as a religious belief by the Supreme Court.
Oh.
When they said take out the 10 Commandments, they no longer can be inside our courtroom.
Okay. So I don't know. Thou shalt not kill. Now, again, separation of church and state, but he makes a point. A lot of people live by those rules, and thou shalt not kill, and yet you're ready to execute folks.
Well, I mean, I think, to go to your point, JC, I would think it's more of a Kantian categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, basically, and the categorical imperative was, espousing that something's only morally right if it's right for everybody, everywhere, in every culture. And so if you look at the 10 Commandments, I don't think that there's anywhere or any place in the world that somebody would think, taking someone else's goods, wife, killing somebody is acceptable behavior, okay,
Right.
and at this time. But it is problematic. I mean, if you notice, our money says in God we trust. The Supreme Court opens with a prayer. The courts here in Davidson County may God save these United States, the great state of Tennessee, and this honorable court. So it is, there are some degree inextricably related, and that's been an age-old issue that's been back and forth.
Yeah, but the fact is, and you made it clear here in Tennessee, death penalty is on the books. It's something that the law, and you could change that.
And there's never been a governor in the history of Tennessee that has ever commuted a death sentence in their first term.
I guess that's right. And as we found out this week, Governor Lee did not commute the sentence, and there's going to be an execution tomorrow.
And quite frankly, I was a little surprised. You know, he was heavily, and I think he still is involved with Men of Valor, the program in the prisons. He's, you know, for prison reform. He is for drug courts and things like that. So I had thought maybe, you know, potentially, you know, he might have looked at some of these a little differently, and he still may. This is just but one case.
Yeah, it's interesting. I posted on that, Nick, and I understand people in support of the death penalty. I understand people who are maybe against it. When he decided not to, at least on my Facebook page, Nick Beres NC5, a lot of the response was people saying, good for the governor sticking to his guns to execute this man. A lot of people believe he deserves to die for what he did to his wife. But some of the vile anger and hatred that I saw in some of the posts from some of these people, it's one thing if you say, good, he's following through, it's the law of the land, good choice. But others like, great, fry him, oh, this is just vile stuff. And it's disturbing to me, the anger I see in the general public about, yeah, this guy killed his wife, just do this. It should be worse to him. We need to make him suffer. That kind of crap. If that's you, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself if you even know what the word grace means. And that doesn't mean forgiving him for what he did. And if you want to execute him because that's the law of the land, fine. But there's a lot of angry, ugly people out there that are salivating over an execution. And again, if that's you, there's something wrong with you.
Well, and just look at our society, look at video games, our culture, and how it's changed. You remember the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Running Man?
Yep.
That came out maybe 30 years ago, and we thought how insane that was, but that's exactly where we are in our games today.
Yeah, but like I said, law of the land and supports death penalty, that's fine, but some of the anger and the stuff I saw posted was, to me, a little bit disturbing. Folks need to show a little more grace and class than that. Anyway, Nick, thank you for coming on.
Sure, thanks for having me.
It's always great to see you. We'll see if we can. We'll just get you on here every month or so.
Sure.
If you don't mind, we got to stay warm up for when we have a gavel-to-gavel trial. So we'll see you soon, my friend.
Yes, sir.
I'll be back with a programming note right after this. Stay with us.